If you've been on the lakes this summer, you know that the water level has been high. Lakes Superior, Erie, and Ontario all set monthly water level records in June and July. Lakes Michigan and Huron were within an inch of their record July level. In late June, WTTW's Jay Shefsky reported on the high water around Chicago.
The Army Corps of Engineers says this week Lake Michigan is 30 inches above the June average and is just 1 inch from exceeding the June record. When the lake is calm, bikes and pedestrians can still get by safely. But when the surf's up, it not only makes for riskier conditions, that's also when serious shoreline erosion happens. Keeping an eye on erosion is coastal geologist Ethan Tierkoff. He's studying changes at Illinois Beach State Park in Zion for the Illinois Geological Survey.
We're essentially using the drone to map the beach, to basically generate a bunch of repeated aerial photographs that give us a nice sense of how the beach is eroding.
And it is eroding. Here is this part of the shore in 2014. And here it is this past April, a loss of more than 100 feet in some places. The impact is even more dramatic just up the shore. That is, or was, a bike path just to our right. And Tierkoff says the damage we see happened in just the last few months. At this spot, since 2014, there's been more than 300 feet of erosion.
And if you actually look out in the lake, you can see where those rocks are. Yeah. That was where the shoreline was in 2014.
What?
Yeah, and so we're not only losing beach, but we're losing coastal habitat that's home to waterfowl, coastal animals, and then just rare and endangered plants as well.
When the lake level was at its record high in 1986, there was a lot of damage along the lakefront in Chicago, and the city invested a lot to shore up its lakeshore.
Over the last 30 years, Chicago has spent, along with the feds, more than $300 million on building shoreline protection projects, which are designed to prevent flooding on Lakeshore Drive, protect the lakefront park system, and make sure that we're ready for the next record high.
But smaller cities around the Great Lakes don't have Chicago's resources, says Brummeyer, and they may have greater challenges.
Smaller cities, you see some fixed structures that might get flooded out by high lake levels. So docks might become inaccessible. You know, tourist boats, charter boats may become inaccessible, have an impact on the local economy. So Chicago's watching and waiting. I think we're protected for now. Whether we start to see more extremes in the future challenge us again, that remains to be seen.
In mid-July, on the east side of Detroit, sandbagging crews worked to shore up canals near the Detroit River. High water and spring rains overwhelmed the sewer system. The flooding started in May. Docks all over the region are underwater. Lake Ontario was higher in July than at any time in the past 100 years. Emily Russell has reported on conditions along Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River for North Country Public Radio.
I've talked to a lot of people whose homes and businesses and docks and marinas have been really damaged. The water was up more than 3 feet above average, and it has stayed high for much of the summer. So I met Robert Carlisle, and he sent us a video of him walking down the stairs to his dock, and you can see it's more than a foot underwater, and it's slamming up against his boathouse.
During windy times, it was splashing up until the doorknob, and it was blowing out the windows, and we were concerned that we were going to lose the entire thing. There wasn't much we could do. Watching that happen is very disturbing.
It's happened 2 out of the last 3 years, so it's just hard to know, and I know a lot of shoreline owners are dealing with that uncertainty right now.
And the uncertainty is giving rise to suspicion. Some aren't blaming Mother Nature or even climate change.
A lot of people are not blaming it on the weather or climate change. They're blaming it on this thing called the International Joint Commission, which manages water levels on the Great Lakes. The IJC had adopted a new management plan in 2017 when there was record high water, and it again happened in 2019. So people are saying, well, it's this new plan that they've adopted. It's the IJC. They're not doing enough, but the IJC has countered that. And they said, no, look at the weather, look at climate change. It's just been a really incredibly wet 12 months. And that was the case in 2017 as well. And so they say it's not the management plan, it's the weather.
High water is a problem for homeowners on the shorelines, but for the shipping industry, these lake levels are good for business. Jason Rohn of the Duluth Seaway Port Authority explains.
So when cargo is loaded into the vessel, it drops the vessel down. It can only load to the depth that the water around it will allow it to load to.
If a freighter is too loaded down, it could run aground in the shallower parts of its route.
So when the water is deeper throughout the Great Lakes, the ships can load deeper, which means more cargo and more profitability per ship. Some freighters on the Great Lakes could carry up to, say, 267 tons more iron ore per inch of draft. That's something like $26,000 of extra iron ore per inch of draft. If you multiply that by 2 or 3 inches, and then multiply it by 30-some trips over the course of a shipping season, that spells out some real benefits for shipping.
What factors push the lake levels up and down? Drew Gronwald, associate professor at the University of Michigan, says there are 3 main drivers.
Precipitation on the lakes, runoff through all the rivers and streams coming into the lakes, and then water loss through evaporation. Those are the 3 real dominant forces that are driving water levels over time.
Precipitation has brought a lot of water into the region in the past couple years, so the groundwater tables are high.
If the soil's already saturated, that rainfall is going to very quickly turn into runoff, into flow in the rivers and streams, and flow right into the lakes and cause the lakes to rise.
Fortunately, the second half of the year should bring some relief.
Green bars represent below average evaporation, and orange represent above average evaporation. Look at the rise here. Evaporation on the lakes tends to increase in the fall. As cold, dry air comes across the lakes cool, and part of what they're giving off in that energy is also water vapor in the form of evaporation. So in October, November, December, we see water levels on the lakes go down.
So we've probably already seen the highest water levels in 2019, but will the flooding be back next year? That's an open question.
So right now, water levels are peaking, and it's almost certain that water levels will decline over the next 6 months. They almost always do in the fall as evaporation starts dominating. Things get tricky when we start trying to look out past the next 6 months into the next year. So the short answer is that when it comes to water levels 6 months to a year from now, we really don't know.
At Great Lakes Now, we aim to cover the Great Lakes region and the people who live here, like you. Please follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our newsletter at greatlakesnow.org.